Ah, welcome. Warm yourself by the fire. Have a seat or snuggle up in your favorite spot and let me tell you some stories. Our first story, Old Sultan, by the Brothers Grimm. A shepherd had a faithful dog called Sultan, who had grown very old and had lost all his teeth. One day, when the shepherd and his wife were standing together before the house, the shepherd said, "I will shoot old Sultan tomorrow, for he is of no use now." But his wife said, "Pray, let the poor faithful creature live. He has served us well many years, and we ought to give him a livelihood for the rest of his life." But what can we do with him?" said the shepherd. "He has not a tooth in his head, and the thieves don't care for him at all. To be sure, he has served us, but then he did it to earn his livelihood. Tomorrow shall be his last day, depend upon it." Poor Sultan, who was lying close by them, heard all that the shepherd and his wife had said to one another, and was very much frightened to think that tomorrow would be his last day. So in the evening, he went to his good friend the wolf, who lived in the woods, and told him all his sorrows, and how his master had meant to kill him in the morning. "Make yourself easy," said the wolf. "I will give you some good advice. Your master, you know, goes out every morning very early with his wife into the field, and they take their little child with them and lay down behind the hedge in the shade while they are at work. Now, do you lie down close by the child and pretend to watch it, and I will come out of the wood and run away with it. You must run after me as fast as you can, and I will let it drop. Then you can carry it back, and they will think you have saved their child, and will be so thankful to you that they will take care of you as long as you live." The dog liked this plan very well, and accordingly, so it was managed. The wolf ran with the child a little way. The shepherd and his wife screamed out, but Sultan soon overtook him and carried the poor little thing back to his master and mistress. Then the shepherd patted him on the head and said, "Old Sultan has saved our child from the wolf, and therefore he shall live and be well taken care of, and have plenty to eat. Wife, go home and give him a good dinner, and let him have my old cushion to sleep on as long as he lives." So from this time forward, Sultan had all that he could wish for. Soon afterwards, the wolf came and wished him joy and said, "Now, my good fellow, you must tell no tales, but turn your head the other way when I want to taste one of the old shepherd's fine fat sheep." "No," said Sultan. "I will be true to my master." However, the wolf thought he was joking, and came one night to get a dainty morsel. But Sultan had told his master what the wolf meant to do, so he laid in wait for him behind the barn door, and when the wolf was busy looking out for a good fat sheep, he had a stout cudgel laid about his back that combed his locks for him finely. Then the wolf was very angry, and called Sultan an old rogue, and swore he would have his revenge. Soon, the next morning, the wolf sent the boar to challenge Sultan to come into the wood to fight the matter. Now, Sultan had nobody he could ask to be his second but the shepherd's old three-legged cat, so he took her with him, and as the poor thing limped along with some trouble, she stuck her tail straight up in the air. The wolf and the wild boar were first on the ground, and when they spied their enemies coming, and saw the cat's long tail standing straight up in the air, they thought she was carrying a sword for Sultan to fight with. And every time she limped, they thought she was picking up a stone to throw at them. So, they said they should not like to fight this way, and the boar lay down behind a bush, and the wolf jumped into a tree. Sultan and the cat soon came up, and looked about and wondered that no one was there. The boar, however, had not quite hidden himself, for his ears stuck out of the bush, and when he shook one of them a little, the cat, seeing something move and thinking it was a mouse, sprang upon it and bit and scratched it. So the boar jumped up and grunted and ran away, roaring, "Look up into the tree! There sits the one who is to blame!" Soon they looked up and spied the wolf sitting amongst the branches, and they called him a cowardly rascal, and would not suffer him to come down until he was heartily ashamed of himself, and had promised to be good friends again with old Sultan. The end. Before we get to our second story, please subscribe, like, and share. And now, The Straw, the Coal, and the Bean, by the Brothers Grimm. In a village dwelt a poor old woman who had gathered together a dish of beans and wanted to cook them. So she made a fire on her hearth. That it might burn quicker, she lighted it with a handful of straw. When she was emptying the beans into the pan, one dropped out without her observing it and lay on the ground beside a straw. And soon afterwards, a burning coal from the fire leapt down upon the two. Then the straw began and said, "Dear friends, from whence do you come here?" The coal replied, "I fortunately sprang out of the fire, and if I had not escaped by sheer force, my death would have been certain. I should have been burnt to ashes." The bean said, "I too have escaped with a whole skin. But if the old woman had got me into the pan, I should have been made into a broth without any mercy, like my comrades, and would be a better fate had I fallen to my lot," said the straw. "The old woman has destroyed all my brethren in fire and smoke. She seized 60 of them at once and took their lives. I, luckily, slipped through her fingers." "But what are we to do now?" said the coal. "I think," answered the bean, "that as we have so fortunately escaped death, we should keep together like good companions, and lest a new mischance should overtake us here, we should go away together and repair to a foreign country." The proposition pleased the other two, and they set out on their way together. Soon, however, they came to a little brook, and as there was no bridge or foot-plank, they did not know how they were going to get over it. The straw hit on a good idea, and said, "I will lay myself straight across, and then you can walk over me as a bridge." The straw, therefore, stretched itself from one bank to the other, and the coal, who was of an impetuous disposition, tripped quite boldly onto the newly built bridge. But when she reached the middle and heard the water rushing beneath her, she was, after all, afraid, and stood still and ventured no further. The straw, however, began to burn and broke into 2 pieces and fell into the stream. The coal slipped after her, hissed when she got into the water, and breathed her last. The bean, who had prudently stayed behind on the shore, could not but laugh at the event, and was unable to stop, and laughed so heartily that she burst. It would have been all over for her, likewise, if, by good fortune, a tailor who was traveling in search of work had not sat down to rest by the brook. As he had a compassionate heart, he pulled out his needle and thread and sewed her together. The bean thanked him most prettily, but as the tailor used black thread, all beans, since then, have a black seam. The end. And now, for our final story. The Old Man and His Grandson, by the Brothers Grimm. There was once a very old man whose eyes had become dim, his ears Dull of hearing, his knees trembled, and when he sat at the table, he could hardly hold the spoon. His son and his son's wife were disgusted at this, so the old grandfather at last had to sit in the corner behind the stove, and they gave him his food in an earthenware bowl, and not enough of it, and he used to look onward at the table with his eyes full of tears. Once, too, his trembling hands could not hold the bowl, and it fell to the ground and broke. The young wife scolded him, but he said nothing and only sighed. They brought him a wooden bowl for a few halfpence, out of which he had to eat. They were once sitting thus when the little grandson of 4 years old began to gather together some bits of wood upon the ground. "What are you doing there?" asked the father. "I am making a little trough," answered the child, "for father and mother to eat out of when I am big." The man and his wife looked at each other for a while, and presently began to cry. Then they took the old grandfather to the table, and henceforth always let him eat with them, and likewise said nothing if he did spill a little of anything. The end.